Joining us now from London, Andreas Krieg. He's an assistant professor at the Defence Studies Department at King's College London. He joins us from there. Andreas, welcome back to the News Hour. Let's kick off by talking about this vote on Capitol Hill that's imminent today at some point. OK, it's a rebuke clearly to Saudi Arabia and to Donald Trump, but beyond that, what can it achieve?
Well, I think for the most part, this is actually more of a symbolic move, that actually the lawmakers of the country of the United States are taking a very strong stance against the White House, the executive, in basically condemning Saudi Arabia. And of course, we have to understand this within the context of the Khashoggi killing and the cover-up of the White House, or somewhat the involvement of the Trump administration trying to cover this up. However, I think it's also very significant that this is a bipartisan motion that at least passed through Senate, which meant that Republicans and Democrats are actually on board condemning the role of Saudi Arabia, of the United States in this war in Yemen. The problem is, however, the House of Representatives has not passed this bill, which means it has to pass both houses, which means we're moving into January, probably, when anyway the balance of power in both of these houses will change after the midterm elections, and then we'll have to go through another motion. But it's a very symbolic move to basically say that the United States are reconsidering their relationship with Saudi Arabia, and the question is just to what extent will that implement what's going on the ground. Yes, it is. The U.S. role is very important in this war because they've provided facilitating support for the Saudi-UAE coalition that was absolutely and is and remains instrumental to that war. Their export of arms has been instrumental as well. But just to say, if the Americans were pulling the plug, it doesn't necessarily mean that it will translate into stopping the war on the ground. It just puts increasing pressure on the Saudis, and I think that's where it is important. It is important that the Americans are increasing the pressure and saying, Saudi Arabia, you have to do everything you can to bring the coalition on board of these peace talks. So far, the Saudis have played along those lines, but we have to keep the pressure going, because if you don't, Saudi Arabia might make another U-turn.
Is that refocusing minds when it comes to peace talks in Rimbo in Sweden? Because they, on the face of it, have gone really rather well, even right down to Martin Griffiths on day one this time last week, announcing a prisoner swap even before they'd had the photo opportunity. So you've got minds being focused in Washington. You had 44 US politicians last March saying I'd go for it. That now figure, we understand, has climbed to 60. And you've got the peace process, allegedly so-called, going on in Sweden.
Yes, I mean, let's put it that way. The threshold for what people were expecting from these peace talks in Sweden was very, very low. So it's very easy to basically outperform expectations because the expectations were really low. But what was important, and I think anybody who went into these talks and everybody who was looking at these talks was saying it was all about trust and confidence building. And I think we've made a very important step into that direction. The question then is, now there is a roadmap that has to be agreed upon, and to what extent can this roadmap be implemented? Because these preliminary talks now, which were touching on some very important issues. So the prisoner swap was very good for trust building, and now I think there has been an agreement reached on the status of Sana'a Airport. That again is an important step. But I think Hodeidah would be another one if we could have an agreement there. The Houthis are saying they're okay with the status of Hodeidah being transferred, or the control of Hodeidah being transferred to the UN. The Yemen government says, no, we don't want this. We're the Yemeni government. We should have control over it. I think that's still a contentious issue. But in terms of confidence and trust building, we are definitely in the right direction. However, this is a very small war of a much bigger war in Yemen, and it only concerns what's going on between the Houthis and this coalition in the north. There are still other wars going on in the east and the south. The Emiratis are still funding massively the Southern Transitional Council, which has militias that are very much surrogates but not really controlled by the UAE. They will continue fighting. And let's not forget, despite the fact that this is all ongoing, the war is still going on. We're not at a ceasefire point yet in reality. And those people who were represented in Sweden are not necessarily those people who will control all these different factions on the ground. Quite the contrary. I think Saudi and the UAE still have a lot of very long reaches into Yemen, and they need to use this to actually stop all these warring factions and to put pressure on all these warring factions to continue fighting. But anyway, this is a very good step in the right direction.
Andreas Krieg, there in London. Thank you very much.
Thank you.